Welcome to the Boise State Project Management Program, Building the Project, Part 2. In our lesson today, we're going to work on basic estimating plus introduce several of the supporting templates in our standard workbook project process. Again, we'll walk through these steps to give you a stronger understanding. Each week we'll be doing this until we get to be able to complete your project and move forward. First, let's review the WBS. From your work in class, your reading and last assignments, what is a WBS? This is a key thing for you to understand. Can you explain that to us? The WBS is a planning process where you take the project and you basically reduce it to smaller detailed components. It's the core of the project. It captures the scope. It's not in the WBS. It's really not in the project. We want to avoid that scope creep activity, and it will help you manage the project. Without breaking it down, a project is very hard to manage at a very high level. Key concept again, a work package, a lowest level. The key points of the who, what, when. How do you develop that? We talked about that in class. We use different tools. Big test for it is the task clear to others. You may be writing it in your plan, but when you give it to someone else, do you have the information there? Not in just description, but in the backup material. Not at times it's called the WBS dictionary or supporting information. Is it small enough for time and cost estimates? That's a critical thing. Do you have good detail to continue the project? However, here's that trade-off again. Don't make it too small. Here we use the workbook template from our last class. We took the data you collected, we grouped the data, we put it in the WBS. Now we're going to show you how it moves over to the PERT tab. And this is a key concept for us to look at it and move forward. However, before we do that, I'd like to take one quick stop in the next slide and show you what the data from basically your WBS looks like when you put it into Microsoft Project. Remember our little sample WBS we developed about the career track program, where we had ID numbers, task, and then we used a thing called dependencies? Well, this is where we basically start breaking down the project to understand what the tasks are of the project. Now I'd like to show you what happens when we take this data and we do some conversions and some edits to make it look how it works in the Microsoft Project tool. This is what Microsoft Project looks like. There are many, many views, and the tool is a wonderful tool, but a little bit complex. So we will work with you to make sure you get a good introduction to it. I will encourage you after this class, during this class and after the class, that you use this tool for many of your projects at school, at work, your internship. The more skills you have with this project, that's one more item on your resume. You can say, I have skills to bring to your company. So as we go back and remember what we had in the Excel workbook, we had these kind of task descriptions. Remember we talked about indenting those tasks to make them build a better flow. Here, remember the predecessors we had from the workbook? Here they are again. And look what happens when we have this called a tracking Gantt. And we have developed basically a flow of those. We have not added time, we've not added people, but that's the first step to get there. That's what it's going to look like as we move your information over to Microsoft Project. So Microsoft Project is coming, a very good tool, but let's take the time and build up the skills to get there. As a reminder, during your studies this week, we looked at cost. And in this class, we were always going to focus on direct project cost. We may add some overhead costs for the project, but what we're not going to be looking at is trying to manage that general administration type activity. So the cost you're looking at, what you'll put in your budget and your activity, are those direct project costs of labor, people, and expenses to make your project successful. That will come out on the budget sheet and other tools we have. But think about direct costs for your project. As we do that, let's talk about some basic estimating activity. This is leverages part of the activity in your text, which I'm sure you've all read and reviewed the slides. Basically, when you do the estimating, who does the work? That's the best source of information. I like the team input to get material and cost estimates. They tell you the most activities. Try to plan under normal conditions, but normal, it's kind of a hard to define sometime in business. Use standard time units for the WBS. If you're going to be using weeks for your task, use weeks. If you're going to be using months, do that. If you're using hours, that's what you use. Make the whole program consistent, which will give you a much stronger view and a complete package. Try to be independent. Try not to have outside influences build your times and estimates for you. Have the team build up from the bottom up and get those skills. We'll talk about contingencies later, but contingencies are when you have extra money put aside for some task. That task may take longer, or you may be some risk you're trying to look at, or you're trying to say, boy, I want to have an extra hedge fund. Well, we'll talk more about those later, but there's task contingencies and there's management. So for the first pass through, let's just not worry about those. We will come back. Number 7, we will plan for risk, but we'll bring that up later in the class. And we'll be looking at risks as we identify those issues that could come up in the future. What activities do we want to add to our WBS, and what funding do we need? Also, I'm going to encourage you to use the tools we have in the class. We'll start with the basic PERT tool as a way to give you some examples and move forward. But as we move to to the Microsoft Project and other tools, try to master these tools. These are skills that will help you in your MBA program and make a valuable contribution to your company. Again, as we look at cost estimates, remember we talked about bottoms up and tops down? So bottoms up to me is the most accurate. So you get the team, the real workers on the team, the people that have the knowledge, the people who make things happen. They can tell you what it cost. The more traditional, more common approach we see in business today is the tops down. Somebody will come back and say, your budget cannot exceed $1 million. Well, what's going to happen is when you get that tops down view, you're going to have to go back into your WBS. You're going to have to look at the task you do. You're probably going to have to reduce the scope. And that is one of the real realities of business today. So again, these two methods are there. Bottoms up is the strongest pure estimate. Tops down is probably the most prevalent in the management situations today. Welcome to 3-point estimating, part of a program called Program Evaluation and Review Techniques, or PERT. We'll learn more about this later when we go through a part called Critical Path Method. Well, we got a lot of acronyms there for you, don't we? So basically what we're looking at a 3-point estimate, we're taking 3 things. There's a pessimistic view of things, there's an optimistic view, and there's a realistic view. And the formula we use is we take the pessimistic, put 4 times the realistic, plus the optimistic, and we divide that by 6 to get a 3-point estimate. There's also a formula where you take the pessimistic times the optimistic, and you divide by 6, and you get a standard deviation. And we'll show you some standard deviation charts over here, because that gives you the range or accuracy. So what you're looking for by using these tools, the smaller the standard deviation, the stronger your estimate. You see wide swings in your estimates and your standard deviation, that's usually a red flag of why does somebody on the team think it's going to take longer or more or quicker or whatever. It's something for you to investigate. Let's go learn how to use the tools of 3-point estimate by using your workbook. I'm now in the PERT tab, and I copied over basically your task from your WBS. Let me walk through some examples with you. I have one as an example put in, but let's talk about recruiting. What if someone says that recruiting will take us 100 days? So I'm using days in my program. That's the most likely. It's 100 days. I can get all of the students I need or want in the program. And somebody says, no, this program is so cool, it's going to be 25 days. Somebody else says, no, I don't know. I think it's going to be 300 days. So your PERT estimate comes down to be 120.8. Wow. So that means that you take this 3-point estimate and you'd enter for a 50% probability 120 days. Then we go over here to your standard deviation, which would mean you can come over here and look and you can see what the variation is on those different numbers through there. So let's go back and let's add some more here. Let's take a little more realistic one. Let's take MBA 503. And somebody said, as a student or for an assignment, this is just for an assignment, it's going to take me most likely is 2 days. And someone else said, no, I can get it in 1.5 days. And someone said, I'm really having a trouble understanding, and it could be 5 days. And look what happens is you come back and you find your PERT estimate is 2.42. And you can go read the rest of the data across there, and we'll talk about that next, of what all these standard deviations mean for you. So this is what the tool does for you. It allows you to develop this column right here called the PERT estimate right in the middle, and allows you to get that numerical 3-point estimate, which is so critical in the 3-point method. Plus, it also computes standard deviation. A lot better and a lot faster than doing the math by hand. So what does the PERT estimate show you? The way we have it set up, where we're looking at 4 times the realistic, it's a 50% probability that the task will be done on time. If you look at 1 standard deviation, and we'll talk about this in class, there's 84%. And again, we'll talk about that in class and how you have to understand standard deviation and what the data is telling you. Many companies sometimes will say, you know what, we want to be really optimistic, so therefore we'll adjust the PERT formula. But for this class, let's use the standard method where we take 4 times the realistic and go from there. Again, this is a key concept. We'll use this in risk data, and understanding standard deviation is a key part of your MBA program and what you're learning here at Boise State. So we're also going to look at some more templates in our video at this time. We're going to be looking at the budget activity, and we're going to be looking at the issue log. So just a quick view of those to give you a better understanding of how these supporting templates are used. Before we talk about the budget template, remember we use the budget template to basically track labor, material, and others. It's a working tool. You're going to capture the key points, and you're going to update it later in Microsoft Project. Once you go to Microsoft Project and understand how tasks are managed, you'll understand why we don't stay with the workbook concept that long. And we're trying to avoid duplication. So learning the basics of what you're trying to put in that tool will give you a stronger use of Microsoft Project when you get there. Again, what's the labor, what's the material, and what's the other? What would be an example of other? So you're doing a marketing program and you're going to fly to Chicago. Well, other expenses on your project would be air travel, room rental, rent-a-cars, and maybe meals. You do have to feed the team once in a while. And those kind of things would be the other expenses for the project. So we're going to ask you along the way to capture labor hours, and we're going to ask you to capture material or other, so you understand the concept of how to manage this as an estimating tool. Welcome to the budget tab. In this tool, you'll be going through, if you had an approved budget, which would come from tops down, and I'm in column A8, I may come through and look at $5,000 for my approved budget. And then as I go through and put cost against that, it should come back and work correctly there. It's starting to add up right for us right there. So in this case, I'm just looking at a case how you looked at workers. You on the project say, well, I don't charge anything. I'm free. Well, you're not really free. So we're going to ask you to come up with some sort of hourly rate for yourself. $10 is a nice number because it's easy to multiply and check. So in this case, the worker had 10 hours, or the hourly rate was 10, or 50 hours, and the higher mathematics we have is 500. So those are the kind of things you want to look at and add to your, this is kind of a tracking tool for you to see where you're going. Your consulting cost, other expenses, a way for you to build your budget. I'm not really that concerned of how much you use this tool. I just want you to understand and enter some data to see some of your relative cost. We will expand upon that later as we go through. But again, this budget tool is very basic, and we will find the data will transfer very nicely in the Microsoft Project and give you some very detailed ability to manage that. And the Microsoft Project version we're using has wonderful reports built in that allows you to communicate to your sponsors. So what's a decision log? Think of a blog, think of a social network, and I like to think of this also maybe like a little Twitter account where you're writing notes to yourself. What's the description? And number one is for this project, we'll use the standard templates to move the data to MSP or Microsoft Project. And you have comments, and you have the owner, and you have it closed. For those that haven't used Microsoft Project, see these little red tabs up here? Those indicate comments. And there we are. And the comment there was for those cells as who made the decision. And you can enter that through the Insert tab. Over here, they're asking you for the status. Is it open or closed? There's other ways to do that and code it by formatting. If you see little red tabs in the upper right corner, that's where the comments are, and they give you instructions to fill that out. So in this case, we have an open item for this imaginary team that I'm with. We need to set a standard time to meet. So we plan that for the next meeting. The owner is the team, or it should be a person. It's open, and we've entered that on that date. When you close that and come back later on, you can come back and make that change to make it happen. That's the basic decision log. So for your projects, we're looking at 1 to 2 basic decisions. Decisions what you started to do, but learn to use this as a blog, a ability for you to keep track of what you did in your project. You will become very busy, and the best way to go back and have your project documented is through basically the product artifacts like this of decision, and we'll have issue, and we'll have risk logs. Just helps you track how you made decisions. Very easy for review and very easy for the team to follow. Well, you're on the track to learn the skills of an MBA and project management. Hope this was helpful for you. Again, we encourage you to read the book, use the student website to review the slides, take the practice quiz for yourself, and come to class prepared with your questions and comments so we can all learn together how to be stronger MBAs and better project managers. So again, welcome to the class.